Hi, Booktube. So before I get into the video, I wanted to briefly mention that I got a new phone. So I have no idea the quality of the video because for well over a decade I was in the Android world of things, and I just got an Apple iPhone, and I have no idea what I'm doing because with the Android phones there is like options for filming videos or taking pictures, but with text, like descriptions of what you're doing. With the Apple phone, everything is little symbols and logos and flowers and little buttons, and it doesn't tell me what these mean, so I have no idea how this video is going to turn out. You'll have to let me know. Maybe it's better than the other phone. I don't know. But I'm never working with the best lighting here because I live in Portland, Oregon, and in the fall, winter, and spring, pretty much it's gray, rainy, and cloudy, and that is what it is right now. And my apartment faces north, no less. So I never have the best lighting. So we'll have to see. Let me know basically how this looks, I guess, compared to other videos. But yes, I wanted to do like a combination video of an October reading wrap up and touch base on the 100 book challenge. I know I did a check-in like a week or 2 weeks in to the challenge, and I had set it up myself because I participated the last year on the 100 book challenge, where you read 100 books that you own before you buy another one. And so I didn't know that it was going to take place again this year because last year was my first time participating. But come to find out, they are starting it, is it today or tomorrow? So I started a week or two early. But that's okay. It's just funny that I'm actually now officially participating in the 100 book challenge. So I want to do a combination, like what I read in October, or like, some of the books I read in October since I last talked to you about them, and then how I'm doing on the 100 book challenge. I even have a sticky note. So I guess we can start there. So I even wrote the date, so when I last checked in with you on the 100 book challenge. So last time I talked about this was on October 21st, and I read 27 books. And as of today, physical books off my shelf, or the one caveat I gave myself is books I either DNF and unhaul, or I just unhaul. Either way, if I unhaul a book or I read the book, that counts for 100 book challenge. So I was at 27 books back in October, and then as of today, I am at 18. So that's a total of 45 books either read or unhauled. So yay, I'm doing good. As I mentioned when I announced this challenge to myself, I would like to get it done by my birthday, which is right in the middle of December. So fingers crossed for me for that. So yes, let's start with, let me see here. I guess also, funny enough, I'm talking about the 100 book challenge, but I did want to highlight one ebook that I read for October. It's a reread from me, but it was just a fantastic reread I just had to mention because Shirley Jackson is an author that I read, I feel like every single October, and I have for quite a long time. And so I reread Let Me Tell You. It's new stories, essays, and other writings, and this is a collection of Shirley Jackson's essays and short stories that weren't collected in her previous publicated works. And I'm thinking like The Lottery, like I think of her most famous short story, and I think there's a whole collection called The Lottery and Other Stories, I want to say. But this came out, I think, in 2016, 2015. I read it way back then, but I haven't read it since. But I wanted to give it a retry, and I again, like, I don't give star ratings to books, but I would say like wholeheartedly 5-star read. I really like how it intermixes essays about her life and raising children, and then it has some of her short stories, and including some that aren't even finished, but they were so unique that the editors were talking about how they had to put those stories in regardless. Not all of them were unfinished, but there was a couple in here, and one in particular I'm thinking of. There might just be one, but also the editors were her children, and there's an introduction. It's Lawrence Jackson Hyman and Sarah Hyman DeWitt. And then also the forward is Ruth Franklin, and Ruth Franklin wrote a biography of Shirley Jackson that I've also read. But yeah, this is just a wonderful, I guess, introduction to Shirley Jackson. If you've only read The Lottery, I would highly recommend this. And if you want to know more about her life, I would recommend this because I've also read, along with reading her biography about Ruth Franklin, I read 2 of her memoirs, and they're hilarious titles. Something like raising demon children, and the other one was something else, but they were so funny. But Shirley Jackson has such a unique way of looking at things, and you know that shows in her stories as well. And so if you want to know more about her life, then you can read this, like some of her little essays, and then you can go to her memoir. So yeah, I highly recommend this author, regardless. And I did want to say that Adrian over at Strip Cover Lit, he is going to be going through this short story by short story, and I'll leave a link in the description below to his channel, because he was asking for recommendations for November of different authors to review, and so I had mentioned Shirley Jackson, so he actually took my recommendation, so he's going to be doing that. So I will leave a link in the description below, and he can do a much better job of dissecting and reviewing and critiquing each of her short stories. Okay, so that's the one ebook I wanted to mention. I read a couple others in October, but right around halfway through October onwards, I focused solely on physical books because I wanted to start doing the 100 book challenge. And like I mentioned, I already covered those first 27 books, but I have 18. I have 18 others to get through. And so I'm just going to briefly show you my DNFs or unhauls. I don't want to give too much depth to them because I didn't read them, or I only read like a couple chapters. So The Blue Bedroom and Other Stories by Rosamund Pilcher. This is an author I read back in middle school and high school. I read all of her works at that time except the short stories. I didn't read this one, but I saw it at a little free library. But it's been lingering on my shelves ever since. It's an author I read at the time, and now I wouldn't say outgrew because I know she's popular here on Booktube, and I know I could get some benefit out of reading her. But I don't know. I have never came back to her after reading a whole slew of her. Like when I say I like focused on her in middle school and high school, like I read all of her works like back to back to back to back, and then like I was done with her and I moved on kind of thing. But yeah, I just feel like it's a collection I'm never going to pick up. If I were to reread something, I probably would go with The Shell Seekers, her most, I feel like one of her more famous books, and it's a mighty chunky book. But yeah, if I want to delve into her, I mean, short stories would be a good way to go, but yeah, I feel like it's something I'm never gonna get to. And then I have a graphic novel I got from a little free library, Pashmina by Nidia Chanani. And this had lots of like dream sequences or like otherworldly things. It was going back and forth, and that's not really my jam. And I feel like there's a theme going on with these because several of these books I got from little free libraries or like really cheap, like 50 cent books. And like these, they just sit on my shelf. And so there's a lesson here for me on I shouldn't pick these up because they just sit here. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some gems that I do find at little free libraries and library book sales, but overall I shouldn't let free or very, very cheap swayed me into buying them. Yeah, I need to really think about what I pick up. And I think I said this back when I did the 100 book challenge last year for the first time. I was coming to like what my own book hauling habits are and how they're not the best. And then this other book I just mentioned on my Friday reads, that this was a book I wanted to read, How I Grew by Mary McCarthy, and I really liked The Group by Mary McCarthy. And this is a memoir of her from age 13 through 21, and I just couldn't get interested in this to read a whole book on it. I really like The Group, and I highly recommend that book, and I feel like I want to read other books before I get to this one, basically, because this one wasn't a slog, but it didn't hold my interest. So this is another one that's going to be walking out the door. So those are my, what is that? I think 7 or 8 books that are unhauling, that are counting. And then I have, I think 11 or 12 physical books that I read since I last talked with you. So I have the Illustrated Walden, or Life in the Woods by Henry David Thoreau. I adore this edition. It's by Fall River Press. And I guess they do, and these end papers, my goodness, these end papers. They do lots of reprints of classics and whatnot. And so in each of the edges, are like the bark of the tree, and there's like there's ink drawings and watercolors, and I mean just like endless art in here. It's just a wonderful book to read. I want to get so many more from the Fall River Press. But for Walden, I have read little quotes here and there, you know, in high school and college. But I like Civil Disobedience I read, but I never sat down and read this cover to cover. And so I finally did, and this is a book I am going to be returning to for sure, off and on. And like, it's like, I don't always agree with everything he's saying, but he has a way with words, I guess you would say, and lots of memorable quotes in here. Like I said, I read quotes before, you know, in high school and whatnot, but yeah, there's for sure so many lines that I could have pulled out. And if I was a highlighter or underliner kind of person, I would have like underlined and tabbed this to death because this was a very good read. And something, yeah, like I'm happy to do the 100 book challenge because often I go to ebooks. And I mean, I try, like this last year or two, I've tried to do like every other to read books off my shelf. But it goes to show, like, you know, when you put emphasis on, you know, what's actually on my shelf that's sitting there, there's some good stuff there, along with like this like clutter of things as well. So yes. Okay, I'll go to completely different genre is children's picture books. This is before the nonfiction November, because starting in November 1st, I am reading only nonfiction. And I have so many shelves of nonfiction to be getting on with. I have, what is it, like over, yeah, at least 2.5 bookcases full of nonfiction books, pretty much. So I have a lot to pull from. But this is Nanita's Big World, The True Story of a Deaf Pygmy Marmoset by Sarah Glenn Marsh and illustrated by Stephanie Pfizer Coleman. And this is about a pygmy marmoset. And it actually, and it has a real picture of what she looks like. And it talks about there is a foundation that, let me see, or conservatory in Florida that focuses on the pygmy marmosets. And so it actually tells like a true life story, but, you know, fictionalized of her time and how the parents like rejected her. And so then they have the humans who are taking over for her when she's really little, and how she likes a toothbrush because she's so small that you can like brush her with a toothbrush. And then she makes a friend, and like how you know, being deaf, how like she wasn't able to communicate or understand fully what the pygmy marmosets were doing at first, but then over time was able to get, you know, to realize what was going on. And then this is the author with the marmoset. So it was a cute story with like really pretty artwork. And then this other one is That Flag by Tamika Fryer Brown, and the illustrator is Nicholas Smith. And this one had a really interesting artwork as well. This is about the Confederate flag and like the history of it, and how there is, let's see, here's part of the history, but it's about two friends, and and these are like little kids, like, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that. But one of the friends, let's go to a picture of them. Their family has the Confederate flag in their front yard, and the other one, which is a black family, they do not. And they the parents of this girl doesn't want her going to this friend's house because even though they're friends, and this girl is not racist at all and hasn't said anything about, you know, anything about her being black or anything like that. This girl's family doesn't want her to go over to her house at all. And eventually through the book, she agrees with the parents on, you know, she shouldn't be friends at all with her. And that part really, it bothered me a bit because throughout the story, something happens where the white girl, her family takes down the flag once they realize the devastation that the flag represents. And so even though she takes the flag, her family takes the flag down, and she didn't know what the flag meant. This girl still at the end was like, I don't know if I should be friends with her. We'll have to see. And so that part bothered me. Like, I really liked, you know, like the history lesson in here of what the flag represents, but I didn't like the ending of like the ambiguous, you know, like the iffy I don't know. I feel like 5 or 6 year olds wouldn't think like that. I think that's something adults would think, how they would think, but not little kids. I mean, little kids can be cruel, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they wouldn't have that label on there of I don't know. It was interesting. It was interesting to think about. Let's see. I have You and I and Yesterday by Marjorie Holmes. This is a woman's story. Like, she's looking, it's a nonfiction book, and she's looking back at her life in little itty bitty town in Iowa back in, what decade was this? Let me see if it tells me. Because it was written in 1973, but it's, so I think it's about like the 1920s or so, 1910s, 1920s. And then it also talks about some about her mom and dad's generation as well. But it's all like reminiscing on the good old days and how things were much more valuable back then. Like for Christmas, for example, how you would get one gift and you would anticipate it and think about it and wait for it. And you were like so happy to get that one thing. Whereas now, like in the 70s, when she's raising, I mean, after she's raised her kids, I'm guessing she raised her kids in like the 50s and 60s, talks about how, like, you know, they didn't value the things like she did because there was a plethora of items to get. And, or in food too. So her kids were always talking about, like, there's nothing to eat in here, even though she had a kitchen full of stuff, refrigerator full of stuff. And so she took them to the grocery store and, you know, pick whatever you want then. And the kids looked around like, there's nothing here either. And then, you know, she talked about when she was a kid, how, you know, it was very basic food, you know, flour, sugar, salt, oatmeal, you know, those kind of things. And you would, you know, sometimes have seasonal things that would come in, but, you know, pretty much you're just getting along with what you have. So, you know, that dichotomy of the different upbringings were very interesting to read about. And I always like the small town captures of things. This next one is Run for Your Life by Barbara Holland. This is another little free library pick that I had found earlier this year. And there's illustrations in here. And this came out in 1979. As you can kind of tell from the artwork here. But it's about 2 kids who get abducted by these kidnappers who are, you know, want these kids for ransom. But they're not very good thieves at all. Like, it's like their first time doing it, and they need money. So the thieves aren't exactly, you know, the kidnappers aren't exactly evil. You know, they're not like, it's not that scary for kids to read this book. But it's still scary enough to be abducted. But the kids, about this main character who he's like, you know, feels like he's weak and kids make fun of him. But through this experience, he comes out as the more confident one who is able to not let the emotions and stress get to him, where he's still able to think through how can he get out of the situation. Whereas the bold, strong-willed girl kind of like loses it, you know, through this experience, and he's able to like, get them out. So, you know, there's like the whole like moral there of the story kind of thing. The next one is The Charlotte Years on Tide Mill Lane. And this is one of the Little House like generational saga books. This is featuring Laura Ingalls Wilder's grandmother, and they're in Boston during the winter, and it was a nice, really super quick read. It's all about the winter coming and Christmas and things like that, and talking about her father's job as a blacksmith and things like that. Let's see. A Book of One's Own, People and Their Diaries by Thomas Milan. This is a book I've had on my shelf for years, and this was absolutely fantastic. Each chapter focused on a different kind of diarist. Is that the right word? So there's creators and there's pilgrims, travelers, chroniclers, what else? Apologists, confessors, prisoners, and things like that. And so this, more than anything, is going to make you want to have a running list of all the diaries that you need to read. Because there's some in here that I have read. And one on my shelf that I actually have on my shelf I haven't read yet. Was it? Oh, I can't remember. It's way up there. I can't remember exactly the title, but I was like, oh, I have that one. Like Dorothy something. Yeah. And so this just makes you want to read all of the diary collections, basically. So yeah, more than anything, there's that. I just want you to know more about all these people, because it covers like a page or two, for a diarist, depending, and it kind of just like slowly morphs its way through, like if it's just one person and then it leads you to another and another kind of thing in this story, in this collection. All the While That Remains, Edward Abbey, Wallace Stegner in the American West by David Gessner. And this is about the author who, his first experience in the West in Colorado, how he was introduced to Edward Abbey and Wallace Stegner. And then he was enamored by them, but for one reason or another, he had to go to the East for work and pulled him to the East, but he still wanted to know more about the West. And so through reading all of their books multiple times, he wants to, now he's going to write this biography of them. And so it's kind of intermixed of a biography, of a memoir of his journey, along with a mini biography of these two authors and comparing and contrasting them. So it's like a triple biography in a sense. But I feel like some of it takes over. I feel like he really is enamored by Edward Abbey, and so that, like, when he talks about him, you can just see like the sun shining on him, basically, compared to Wallace. I mean, he likes them all of them, but you can see, like, I feel like where he's leaning more towards. But overall, this dragged a bit. It felt kind of repetitive, and I feel like I could have gotten more out of instead of having a triple biography. If you just focused on one of the three, I feel like it would have been a better book. Okay, Still Meadow and Sugar Bridge, Gladys Tabor and Barbara Webster, and this is illustrated by Barbara Webster's husband, Edward Shenton. And here are the two authors, Gladys Tabor and Barbara Webster. This is the first Barbara Webster book that I have read, and it's a letter collection between the two authors, like literally back and forth. And I read many of Gladys Tabor books and have loved them. She has my own Cape Cod. She has a summer house on Cape Cod, and then has a house in the woods in Connecticut. And then she's talking to Barbara Webster, who has her own home in the hills of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. And it's delightful. Like, from the very first page to the last, it's so heartwarming, and it's something, this would be really nice to like curl up with a fire at Christmas time to read, that kind of thing. It's just a delightful read, and I want to read more from Barbara Webster. But she is much like Gladys Tabor can be hard to find because she's out of print, but Barbara Webster didn't write that many books, and she is extremely hard to find. So I don't know if I'll ever read anything else by her, but I'm happy to have read this collection, and I will show you some of the artwork here. And so Barbara has a giant Great Dane, and she has a small house and a very narrow staircase. She's always talking how funny it is to see, like, his back legs are like, it's a windy kind of staircase, and so the dog's legs are on one part, and then he's curving around to make his way. And there's lots of artwork all throughout here, and a lot of them feature the two houses in the different seasons. And I think the very first page, oh, actually, yeah, here's a picture. This is Still Meadow, so Gladys Tabor's house. And then over here is Sugar Bridge in Pennsylvania. Okay, and then I have just two more. Vermont is Always With You by Margaret Hurry Wolf. This is a essay collection of her time in Vermont and Kansas and Boston, and she's reminiscing mostly about Vermont, and she eventually, like, in the back, it talks about she finally makes her way back to resettling there in Vermont, because this is like a republished work, like I think 20 years after they had moved away. But her husband was a doctor, and so they were in New York City, and they had a summer home in Vermont. And eventually they were able to move to Vermont when he became the dean of the School of Medicine in the University of Vermont. But then, like, I think it said like 9 years they were there, and then they had to go to Boston for 5 years because he was the School of Medicine, the dean there. And then he got a job in Kansas City at the university over there. So they made their way even farther away than Boston was. But she talked about how even though she was like 1,500 miles away, she still didn't feel that far, because the people, like, she's talking about Kansas compared to Missouri. Like, Missouri was settled by Southerners, and Kansas, there was a lot of New England people that settled there. And so she said, like, the personalities, this is like back in like the 1950s, the personality of the people that she was meeting, a lot of them had that New England vibes, if you will, you know, that she didn't feel too far away, even though the weather was, you know, much different and things like that. And she really liked, you know, where they were living. They had, like, because he was the dean of the School of Medicine, they had this like 1800s, like a giant Tudor house that was having lots of problems, but they got to, you know, live there for free basically with all that moving going on. But then, you know, she was like eventually made her way back to Vermont, and I like this one, but I like the other one. Let me see here. I'm knocking over things. I like this one better. I'll take The Back Road, because this one is much more about her missing Vermont, whereas this one, she's talking about actually living there, you know, day to day, which I appreciated. But this one does talk about that a little bit here and there. She's raising 2 kids who, and all of her friends talk about how, you know, how the kids, oh, it's so nice for them to live in the country, and how nice it is for her, but she's always talking about how exhausting it is because she's having to upkeep with the chickens and the goat and the horses and the kids and the farm and the garden and all of that. And she's like, if I have any more fun, I'm gonna be dead because I'm so tired, kind of thing is what she was saying. And then this last one is Of Time and Place by Sigrid F. Olsen. This is each essay in here is like 2 to 3 or 4 pages, so very short, it almost felt a bit choppy in a way because you're switching subject to subject in a very short amount of time. But it seems to be like his last book, at least because this was printed like the year he died in 1982. But this is talking about him reminiscing on the different canoeing pals that he had, and the different campsites he went at, and lots and lots and lots of fishing trips. And so I feel like this is mostly him looking back on his life in his time in the northern part of Minnesota, and Ely, Minnesota, near this like huge lake and river area that he features in, I feel like, all of his books. But this was nice to read. It wasn't, I feel like, as good as some of his other books, but I'm happy to have read that one. So this is all of the books that I've read since I last spoke to you. I didn't feature like the audiobooks and some of the ebooks. I just wanted to highlight that one by Shirley Jackson. But yeah, really going forward, I'm going to be focusing almost solely on books off my shelf until I get to that number 100. So anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.